Hello and welcome to Seminary Reacts. My name is Amy, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Drew Hart, who is an associate professor of theology at Messiah University. We have a couple of books that he's written here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you teach, what your passions are?
So I have been teaching at Messiah for almost 10 years, 9 years, I guess now. I teach a range of courses: African American theology, Anabaptist theology. I teach our Theology 2 course for majors, which is themes on peace, justice, and reconciliation. I teach a Christian ministry course called Mobilizing Congregations for Justice. I have a new course, which is kind of fun. We have an Ethics and Common Good category, and mine is Christendom, Colonialism, and the Common Good. And the only other course, I guess, that I teach regularly every fall is a first-year seminar on faith and anti-racism.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Well, it's really awesome to have you here. You're here for a conference this week at AMBS, so it's really awesome that we were able to make this happen and you're able to join us in person.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. Before we dive in, what experience do you have with Reddit?
So I have no experience with Reddit.
Cool.
I don't use Reddit. I don't look at Reddit. And I just always hear horror stories from people. I don't know if it's fair or accurate, but people say it's a little wild. It's a whole nother world over there.
Yeah. So specifically, we're going to be looking at some of the Christian side of Reddit. Sometimes people are posing stories and just kind of asking the Reddit world, like, hey, what should I be thinking about this? What should I be and sometimes they're asking questions about their faith. Sometimes they're not getting those answers in the communities where they are. So they pose them to Reddit. And sometimes we get some good answers from people who are responding. And then sometimes I see questions where I feel like it'd be good to bring it up here to just give a more in-depth answer.
Yeah.
All right, are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So our first question here is coming from the subreddit. So there's different communities that exist within Reddit. So this is coming from the specific community subreddit called Open Christian. And the title of the post is, why are progressive churches usually so white, and is this a problem? So the post itself, the original poster says, so it's something I noticed early while exploring progressive churches. I'm Latina and lesbian and couldn't remain Catholic due to my sexuality, so I've been exploring other churches lately. I would prefer a more energetic and charismatic worship experience, but also want a church that accepts me, and unfortunately, those two together may not be possible. But I've found, despite often talking about racial justice, progressive churches I've been to are very, very white. This doesn't really bother me too much. I've dated white girls plenty of times, and I'm actually pretty white myself in appearance, and I even put myself down as white as well as Hispanic and Latino descent on the last census. But my childhood Catholic churches were much more racially diverse, as are a lot of the evangelical and neo-charismatic churches I've been to. I don't know if this comes across as an issue to many. Like I said, I'm fine attending such a church if it means meeting my spiritual needs and accepting me, but I can see that this might also be an issue for these churches that claim to be to find racial justice important.
Yeah.
So this just got me thinking, why exactly is this the case? So again, this main question is, why are progressive churches usually so white, and is this a problem?
Yeah, such a great question, right? Such a great question. And I mean, so I'll answer with a simple answer first, maybe, and then we can unpack it, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the answer is yes, there is a problem there. It's a very serious problem that's there. And then we can maybe think about some of why. And I do think one easy thing to just note that I've observed engaging in white progressive churches is that oftentimes they have a very thin understanding of white supremacy and racism. And so they think that it's a conservative problem, right? And so the bad conservatives, whether it be in the South or certain particular denominations and traditions, those are the bad racists. And so as long as they're not perpetuating those things and maybe have some racial ideology that they've learned in some language, they can talk about intersectionalism and all that kind of stuff, then they imagine that they then there are the good white people, right? And so it's this really binary way of thinking about racism and white supremacy. I think the challenge is for people to dig deeper and get to the root of the problems. And I mean, the entire white Christian project was birthed out of entanglement with white supremacy, right? From its very origins. And so it didn't really matter what denomination you were a part of, what tradition specifically, like all the traditions were entangled in it, right? Many of the traditions that people are running to, imagining that somehow they're outside of it, I mean, the Episcopalian Church has deep ties to colonialism globally, right? And in fact, actually helped teach, there were in around like 1701, Anglican missionaries came and helped taught how to do slavery right as Christians in America, in the US, right? Our story, there's just so much entanglement across the board. White, progressive, evangelical congregations, right? Sometimes, again, think that they're not the bad folks because they say all the right things. But I think what hasn't always happened is people haven't done the deeper internal work themselves to think about, like, what do I need to be transformed of? What might still be captive in me? What are my own biases and inclinations and practices that need to be wrestled with? And so oftentimes I tell white progressives, like, there's decolonizing work of one's own self and one's own community that needs to happen, right? Because often, I mean, I've done church-like assessments for congregations, for white congregations, and oftentimes it's the progressive churches are the ones that are most committed to not changing who they are in any form, right? And so there's this white normativity that's taken place and cultural assumptions that their way is the best way. What is that? That's a superiority complex, right? A lot of times in those spaces, there's a paternalism, right? We're going to help these other people. And so you can go out and participate in Black Lives Matter movements and not necessarily see that, oh, we may also need to be liberated from something also. There's mutual liberation that needs to happen here, and it's not just one way, right? So I think these are some of the deeper issues that often go unaddressed and unnamed in white progressive spaces that really need to also be tackled if they're gonna really, you know, create space where the beloved community can happen. And just while I would say, like, other churches, like Black church, there's a plethora and there's a spectrum, right? So there are Black churches, I think about the prophetic stream of the Black church, where folks have been affirming of all people within their communities, speaking out on justice and all those things, mutual aid, community development, struggling for justice, grassroots work. Like, those communities do exist too, and I think sometimes they get erased out of the conversation when people are thinking about progressive and stuff. The Black church is not a monolith, right? And some of these other communities are not. And I know there are certainly some of those communities that do maybe only focus on race and reproduce patriarchy, but there are other communities that have actually wrestled with this as well. And so I think for white progressives, there's actually opportunities to learn from some of these communities that have been doing this for decades, right? Under the radar, without all the attention that maybe some of the white progressive churches get for engaging some of the same topics and issues and concerns.
Yeah, I mean, like what you've just said here, that's kind of where my brain immediately went, is like, and I don't know where this person is located. I mean, people on Reddit tend to want to remain pretty anonymous, so we don't know where this person is living. So there might be a chance that if they're in a predominantly white area, then they're not able to find churches that are more diverse in terms of race. But I mean, kind of my thought too, or quickly, was like, well, there are a lot of progressive churches that are not white, but yeah, it seems like it does end up being pretty under the radar, or just doesn't present in maybe the way that people, I don't really know, like,
Right, because they don't look the same
Right.
way. Like when I think about like Trinity UCC on the south side of Chicago, like they're not going to use all the code words that white
Right.
progressives are used to, right? It's
yeah.
going to show up differently. But it's a space that has been committed outwardly and it's taken backlash for being open and inclusive for all people, right? But that's not the only thing that's orienting what it means to be a good, welcoming community for them, right? They recognize that there are a lot of other multidimensional factors, intersecting oppressions. And so here's a Black community that's historically been, targeted in terms of this neighborhood. This literally is that the church I was just naming, like, took backlash in the Obama years because of Jeremiah Wright at that time was the lead pastor. It took national backlash, right? So there's these other larger forces at work as well. And so they don't have the luxury of just talking about sexuality, right? They have all these systemic issues that they're trying to confront and trying to be a network and provide, safety and survival and liberation and empowerment for their people and their community.
Yeah. So there really is this just reality. Like, I think especially for white progressive people, their version of what an inclusive church might look like is having a particular welcome statement and having like you said, like code words in that, and like association, like having I know a lot of churches will have like the rainbow flag in their logo in some way to really push it forward, and so I think there's kind of this assumption then that like if a church doesn't have those things, then they're automatically not inclusive in all the ways that this person is looking for, because there is like this intersectionality, this person being Latina and lesbian, and trying to find. I mean, she says that she would prefer a more energetic and charismatic worship experience, but she also grew up Catholic. So and it seems like she's been able to like find a home in a congregation that is more white. But I think like this is a valid question to be asking from her perspective, and kind of noticing that she doesn't necessarily feel like she's exactly fitting anywhere. It's kind of hard to find those spaces.
And church, I think probably anybody that attends church can feel the tensions of just the complexities of belonging and trying to find a place, right, where you fit in. And for many of us, we don't have that perfect place, right? But we also hoping to carve out and at least find a space where there is some belonging, and where more of that is being carved out day after day if people are committed to each other, right? But I do know a lot of folks who've gone to, like, people of color, Black folk especially, who've gone to white progressive churches and over the years like feel burned out over time in those spaces too, and so they haven't built the muscles for learning how to like love their Black siblings very well in those spaces often, right? And so they might be addressing some things and then oblivious to other things, and so there's still work to be done. And if we're always in the binary, just thinking like we're the good folks, then it doesn't create the space for that kind of ongoing transformation of ourselves again, and as our communities as a whole. And I think that I think ultimately is the biggest thing. And that's where the whiteness, the white supremacy can keep people captive, right? Is thinking that they've arrived. It's just the flip side of the coin of white supremacy, that thinks racism is bad, and also thinks that the way that they do everything is the best way to do it. And can't even fathom that there's something to learn from others in terms of how to gather and fellowship and share resources and be community together.
And that looks a lot of different ways.
It looks a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and so I think like for a church that says like, well, we're being inclusive in this specific way, and like this is the only way to show that, like there's a lot of range there. And I think like I really love visiting churches, and so like I really like kind of exploring the ways that different churches are being inclusive, but also just like being involved in their communities and recognizing the systemic issues in their communities and figuring out how can we be serving the people in our neighborhood. And I think there's a lot more to what it means to be, I guess, progressive, but like thinking about undoing the harmful systems and loving our neighbors. There's a lot more to that than just kind of labeling as progressive. Yeah. Before we go on to our next question, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. But I just think that it's a really important conversation point for white progressives to be leaning into their own work, and that there's more than just the language and having done book studies and things. But our actual lives must change, right? Our habits must change. Who we learning from must change and grow. Can white progressives decenter whiteness in their own contexts, right? I think those are the bigger challenges that must be addressed. And it's unfortunately very rare in white progressive churches for that to be taken very seriously. So I have a follow-up question to that before we go on. If someone is listening and they hear this and they go, yeah, I really want my church to be doing this, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a member of the congregation there, and they see this and they say, yeah, I want to do this work, where would be a good starting point? If they're very unfamiliar with this kind of work, where would you say is a good entry point to be learning more and trying to get their congregation to be thinking about this more? I mean, probably what I would say to that person is actually, as an individual themselves, they need to break out of the typical norms and patterns of what is expected of white people in their own lives first, right? So interrogate, where do you live and why do you live where you live? And are you willing to live other places? Who are you in relationship with? Not only who's around your table, but what tables are you around in other spaces? Are you putting your body in places where you can, I'll use the word, be socialized differently, right? Learn how to move in the world differently, where your way is not the norm, and where you can decenter and learn and appreciate other ways of being in the world, right? Who do you sit under? Can you sit under, right, the leadership of people of color and black folk in particular, right? Like, is that a part of your rhythm and habits? So I guess, because that's the kind of stuff, like when you place your body outside of the norms of what white bodies are supposed to do and where they're supposed to be and who they're supposed to be alongside of, like that's, and doing so with openness, not trying to change other people, but literally trying to change yourself in the process. That's what you can bring back, and you will see and know, right? More than anything else, it's that lived experience of actually becoming something else that you'll be able to help other people see and know. Because otherwise, people don't even know what it is. Like I go into white spaces and people are trying and they don't even know. So it's like, oh, we're going to be multicultural. And so they're singing random songs and things, but they're not changing who they are, right? So it's aesthetics, but it's missing the points. So they're not even doing the aesthetics the right way because they haven't done the deeper work out of which everything else flows, right? So I'm at a multiracial church. We're in the hood, but like there's times where, like I've said it to her, we'll do worship and they'll sing some gospel songs and things like that, but we go through it like a set, like a white church would, right? We did this song, now it's the next song, and now it's it. And so we don't even know how to create the conditions for which, like, worship in many communities, like, it's not going through the songs, it's encountering God. And how do you create an atmosphere for people to have that experience, right? And so you might have a lull and a space, and it's just But there's something else going on beyond what songs did you sing.
Right.
It's how do we do that?
Right.
And so how do we worship together and cultivate this communal experience together collectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of stuff that can only be, I think it's experiential, right? That we begin to pick up and learn the deeper texture and get to the root of some of what's different about what we're experiencing. So I do think I invite people to interrogate their own lives, which is the harder work and the work that most people are not willing to do when you actually bring that up, right? Then that feels like that's gone too far because we want a book study or this or that, right? And people are willing to do that.
Right.
They're willing to do the book studies, but they're not necessarily willing to subvert their own lives and the trajectory of their lives.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah, and I like the word interrogate because I think as you were talking, the word that came to my mind was reflection. But I think interrogate does that. I mean, it describes what you're saying so much more effectively. To really grapple with that, and I also appreciate your mentioning of like there might be like an instinct to like join a book study and to be doing that kind of work. But I mean, doing that internal work and that can be a part of the process, right? I do think there's learning that can, but it's only one part of yourself. It's not the full self. Right. Well, and I think like with book studies, they can be helpful, but they often make things feel very theoretical and not like having that lived experience is so meaningful in doing that interrogation. Yeah. So it's really important work to be doing. Yeah. All right, moving on to our next question here. We have a story that is coming from the subreddit. The subreddit is called Am I the Asshole? We're going to use the phrasing of Am I in the Wrong so that we don't have to bleep too much. So from the subreddit, the title of this post is Am I in the Wrong for Not Singing at Church? I hate singing. I almost never do it. I sang lullabies to my kids when they were little, and I sing the birthday song at birthday parties. But other than that, I rarely sing except as a joke, singing badly to troll my now teenage kids. It just isn't my thing. I don't like the sound of my own voice, and singing brings me no joy at all. This has caused a small fight with my wife. We go to church every Sunday. As with most churches, they sing a half a dozen songs before the service starts. At our current church, everyone stands while singing. I am respectful and stand along with everyone else, but I don't sing along with them. This church shows the lyrics on a large screen, so nobody is required to hold a hymn book, but at previous churches where they sang out of the books, I would also hold the hymn books and follow along in my head, but would not sing. My wife thinks I am being disrespectful by not singing. I feel I am being respectful by standing with everyone else, opening the hymn book to the right songs when at the church, and generally following along and being a part of the service except for the actual singing. Nobody has ever said anything to us. It isn't like we've gotten complaints about my not singing, but she also thinks I'm in the wrong when it comes to this, and I don't think it's as big as a deal as she is making it out to be. So Reddit, am I in the wrong here? Wow. There's like different angles. Like I want to come at this from different angles because there's a lot of different answers I could give to him, right? Let's see. Where do we want to begin? Well, on one hand, I mean, I think there's something really meaningful about being true to yourself and authentic to who you are that is really important. And so if someone can't be authentically themselves in this space, I don't think church should be a place where we are just putting on a front so that we don't make other people feel uncomfortable, right? That's not helpful. That's not helpful for that person or for the community. So the rationale that he's being disrespectful, I'm not sure if I follow that specific rationale, right? So I think that's my starting points, right? But then immediately I want to ask the guy some questions. And maybe it's my bias, but if he finds no joy in singing, I also am curious about like his own humanity and what has gone on that has got him to this place where something
like singing doesn't provide joy and he finds no meaning in that, right? So I'm curious, I'd want to ask him all kinds of questions, and interview him and interrogate him about his own life and his own journey up to this point, because maybe there's also some malformation there that has gone on that has disconnected him from his own humanity as well, right? And so on that side, singing may be potentially an invitation to let go of some things and find joy and to be fully human in ways that he's not, right? So I do think there's that. And then the other thing that I think about that maybe is a little bit more pro singing as well is I'm really curious about how he thinks about his faith and relationship to being a part of a community. So does he see himself as merely just showing up? We're all a bunch of individuals who show up and have our own little consumer experience from the professionals who are going to give us something for the day, right? Or is he a part of something bigger, a communal thing that's happening, right? That he's participating in. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he must sing for everything, but there is a broader sense of community and shared experience if you have a communal faith that says we, the community, are the church and we're doing this together rather than I'm just showing up for myself and just happen to be in a room because this is the gathering time where we come and get our thing and then go on our way as individuals, right? And so it's that hyper individualistic Western mentality could also be shaping, I think, some of that orientation against singing. That said, this is my last thought, and then we can maybe pick up. But like, there's times I do not sing intentionally certain songs, and there's certain songs I will sit for. There's certain things I will stand quietly, and certain things I willfully choose, I will not sing these songs, right? I doesn't get myself in trouble publicly, but like, I can't stand most CCM music. I think it's terrible for the church. I think it's a disease for the life of the church. And the commercialism, the shallowness of it, the me-centered individualism of it, the lack of content that turns people towards the person and life of Jesus, the character of God, commitments to justice and mercy that are a plethora throughout the scriptures, right? A lack of things like lament and other, just the range that we see throughout the scripture. Like, most of these songs are orienting people in ways that actually perpetuate, I think, the typical mainstream American life, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so I've come to a point where, like, when I hear a lot of these songs, I usually intentionally opt out. In some ways you could say that is my worship, right? Is I refuse to participate in what I think is imperial worship to a domesticated God that doesn't look like Jesus, right? So for me, there are times when I individually decide, even if I'm a part of a community, that I'm not going to participate in some things, right? And so I do think, like, there is this balance between communal participation and also, like, the convictions of wanting to be faithful as you understand it in your own convictions as well. And there's a tension sometimes between those two things, right? So anyway, those are some of my kind of, at least initial thoughts of different angles in that is not an easy yes or no of right or wrong, but there's probably some conditions and situations that need to be unpacked there.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is, like, this experience of singing and the communal nature of it when you're singing with other people in a church, I know that's been a conversation I've been a part of with people at multiple different times, because I come from a tradition where worship is a very individual experience, and it's, like, led by the professional up front. And I was in a situation where we were starting to do music with some more instruments. We were bringing in drums and guitars, and the music was really loud. And there were some people in that space that didn't like that because they couldn't hear the other voices in the room.
Yeah.
And I think there's this interesting dynamic because I think like I have worked with people who enjoy that the music is loud because, like this poster, they say they have a terrible voice and they don't want anyone else to hear them.
Yeah.
And so having the loud music allows them to be able to sing without being heard and feeling insecure about their voice. But I also, after spending more time in congregations and with groups of people who really, really value the communal aspect of worship, I mean, I have grown so much of an appreciation for that too. Like here at the conference this week, there's been a lot of singing, and there are times when I actually like stop singing, not for the same reasons that you said, but just because I want to take it in. Just listening to the room, singing, listening to the harmonies in the space, and just kind of feeling like absorbed into that community that's there. In appreciation of it. So, so I kind of see, like, I wonder what you think about that idea, like, that I think having, like, the louder music and the experience of being very individual in worship, like, I think there needs to be more of a push for, especially with music that's, that tends to be more individualistic. There should be more of a push for making things more communal. But also I see the value of people not wanting to be heard when they're singing at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is it about particular communities that make people self-conscious about their singing quality as a prerequisite for participation, right? Like what's going on there, or maybe it's just a broader pressure of perfectionism or something, right?
Right.
Not wanting to, like, so there's also work that we're like, we cultivate these things in people or not, right? That also would shape that dynamic. But yeah, I'm with you. I do think moving and helping cultivate that kind of more communal, nature of the singing, I think it's a really healthy thing for churches to be doing. And so I hate a legalistic rule on whether someone should sing or not, right? But I do think an orientation towards singing and participation is a good thing for communities and for individuals who see themselves as part of something bigger than just themselves. Yeah, being a part of the communal experience. And because I think it's recognizing, like, our worship is not meant to be like a performance for other people around us. We actually, it was a lot of episodes ago, but we read a story that was from the perspective of someone in a congregation, and they were often sitting next to a family where the members of that family were extremely tone deaf, and the person who was writing the post wanted to say something to this family and tell them, like, hey, you're singing very loudly and you're not singing well, and it's distracting other people from their worship. And I mean, with myself and the guests, we kind of oriented it into being like it seems like because in the particular situation, it kind of seemed like this family was kind of ostracized from the rest of the church. And so, like, we kind of gave the encouragement to the poster, like, build community with them. And we also talked about how, like, how much this family would be, like, filled with the Spirit to be worshiping loudly, and it doesn't need to be perfect, and how, like, instead of judgment, like, let's work with appreciation here, because the worship isn't about us, I mean, having perfect pitch and being able to sing everything perfectly, but, like, the role of the Spirit in that, and I think, like, thinking of the Spirit's role in the worship and also the community and how valuable that is. It's so easy to Cultivate insecurities, right, in these moments. And again, it's just one more way in which we don't show up as our full selves in community with others. And so, how do we, like, that is the norm everywhere. How do we break out of that and have a counterintuitive approach to how we gather? I think singing is in some ways it's a habit and practice that is more than just the worship, but it is also allowing people to just be themselves and be joyful and be filled with the Spirit in community with others, right? And that should be celebrated, I think.
Yeah. So there's one comment I want to read that kind of shifts the conversation a little bit more from just this person's role within the church, but also, I mean, it seems like a big part of this is that like the worship and the singing is very important to this poster's wife. So this comment says, "I think you are in the wrong for not seeing how important this is to your wife. You're not being asked to sing a solo, you're singing with everyone else in the church. Also, not to get too churchy, because I know Reddit hates that, which that's not true, but congregations sing during worship services because it's a joyful noise of celebration to God. If you're not in church to celebrate God with everyone else, then why even go?" And then we also have another comment that's saying, "You're not in the wrong, sing the words, read the words to yourself so that your lips move, and don't worry about singing. Singing in church is only one way to express devotion to God, and if you don't want to sing, don't. Lots of people don't sing in church." Yeah, so we just kind of have a little bit of a different way of thinking about this, particularly thinking about like the wife in the scenario, because it's like the language that she uses, that it's disrespectful. And so some other comments related to this one kind of said like she's trying to communicate that it's disrespectful to her, not that it's disrespectful to like the people in the church or something. But also just like also recognizing like kind of what we've already been saying is that singing is supposed to be like a celebration of God, is the way that this commenter said, not just there as a performance for other people that are in the room.
And I'm not sure if I see it as a disrespect to her, but maybe there's more texture to that than I'm understanding, but I'm not seeing that from it sounds like she is, I mean, we just came from a conference, we were talking about internalizing expectations of others,
right.
that she's doing that, internalizing maybe the norms of that community for herself, and projecting that and putting those external expectations on him. So I'm just not convinced of that specific rationale. I do think, but at the same time, most of the comments like are hyper individualistic in terms of how they're thinking about why he should or shouldn't. Either way, right? Because for me, it's not about is it right or wrong in and of itself. I mean, you can go to a Quaker meeting. I've been to Quaker meetings before, right? And in fact, the frustration is when people talk too much, right? And especially the traditional Quaker gatherings, like, they say only a few people should speak, and sometimes people just can't help themselves, right? And so it's what is meaningful for the community can really vary, and how we individually connect to God can vary as well. And so, but I always feel like there's got to be some level of interplay between how I'm wired and oriented, and also the community that I'm a part of. There has to be a relationship between those two things.
Right.
It might not always be clean. It might be easier for some people, but there has to be, I think, it should be, leaning into some, dynamic play between my own preferences and the community that I'm a part of.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I like that you tied in like the internalized expectations into that, just this, because I think that's so much of what's happening here is like there is this expectation that like when you show up to church, you're supposed to act in a very particular way. And I think like in what we're seeing in the comments and in the story, it is very individualistic. And at the same time, it's like while there is a lot of individualism, there's also like the externalized pressure as to this is the way you're supposed to act in church. Right. And so I think it's interesting to think about then, like, if a church has a particular way that people do things, and someone comes in from a different tradition and says, well, this is how I worship and I want to be a part of this space too, like, it's then interesting, I think, like, as a worship leader or as the person that's attending, is like, how do you kind of navigate those things and figure out, like for this person, it's about singing, but in other different kinds of practices too, in the structure of the service and the way that community works, like kind of balancing, like, okay, in what ways do you have to like adapt to what the community is doing, and then in what ways can you try to bring in something new at the same time?
So I think the ideal would be is for there to be space for conversations around that as a community, right?
Yeah.
And for them to also say, like, how can we be thoughtful about ways that other people worship and connect to God? And can we, you know, start instituting other practices and things within our community for folks that are engaged and that would prefer other ways of connecting or feel like they can connect to God better in those ways, right? I think that would definitely be the ideal situation. And I know I've been in communities where I've initiated those kind of conversations so that we can think about all the different ways that we are engaging and all the different expectations that are in the room that are sometimes unstated, right? Around worship and it's, in some ways, there's power dynamics there, right? In terms of whose expectations are going to be fulfilled and what the norms are, and who we can kind of just dismiss also. So,
But yeah, I think you're right in that, like, having a particular space to say, like, hey, this is, and say it out in the open, and being able to say, like, this is the way that we are doing things, and this is where this is coming from, and not just, like, having it exist as a norm that everyone just exists, like, assumes is there, but being able to have those conversations and inviting other people into those conversations that are new and have different practices as being really important.
The tension, I mean, I think most of our churches have overswung to just individuality. There certainly are some contexts where community is the only thing that matters, but I do think we have to take seriously both. You know, I think that is the harder challenge and the ongoing work, which means if you really are doing that, then you never arrive. It's just always an ongoing process of making sure that you're being a healthy community together, and allowing the different ways that people are showing up to have space to fit in, assuming that they're showing up in healthy ways in the community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're wrapping up here, are there any impressions that you've gained from Reddit, just from those two stories that we've talked about?
Well, clearly people are having lots of fun questions that they're posing. Yeah, people are posing a lot of fun questions and important questions. And also, it's a reminder that there needs to be a lot of wisdom and different perspectives in conversation to help people think through these kind of things. Sometimes our primary instincts are not actually helpful, right? And so I think also, like, there's some counterintuitive wisdom that needs to be brought into conversations sometimes that maybe go against our impulses and that are actually healthier for all of us in the long run.
Yeah. And I think, like, you mentioned this, and this also goes back to what we were saying before about, like, kind of interrogating our own context. But we saw in the comments and in the ways that these posts were written, is that there is a tendency for sometimes Reddit to be have very much of a Western and individualistic mindset. And so, sometimes I think it's good to be naming that and then kind of giving some alternative ideas. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining with us today. I hope you've enjoyed your time kind of thinking about these different things and hearing from some of the vast questions and stories that people are posting on Reddit. We just saw, like, a little bit of a glimpse of it here. And there's certainly more from there, but I'm glad you're able to be here and have a little bit of a conversation about some of those things.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And thank you for watching this episode or listening. If you have any particular themes or questions that you would like us to be reacting to, any particular Reddit stories or questions that you have found yourself, please feel free to comment those and send those to us. And you can always find Seminary Reacts on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. See you next time. Bye!